Have you ever seen a piece of furniture that looks more like a building than a cabinet? It's called Trumeau Architettura or Architecture Cabinet, designed in 1951. I first encountered it in the Decorative Art Gallery of the New Orleans Museum of Art. At first glance, it looked like a cabinet, but also like a miniature scale model of a building with a uniquely eclectic style. This remarkable piece was born from the collaboration between the form maker Ponti, the celebrated Italian architect, and the decorator Piero Fornasetti, the visionary decorator whose imaginative world I've been deeply fascinated by. The cabinet was first presented at the 9th Milan Triennale in 1951, though it wasn't accepted well by the design community until the 1980s. Unlike most simple mid-century modern furniture of its time, it stood out, attracting public curiosity and even some commercial success. Only a limited number of versions were produced in the 1950s and 60s, each showing subtle yet interesting changes in form and decoration by Fornasetti himself. Today, it remains highly sought after by collectors and museums around the world. One of the two original 1951 pieces was sold for $280,000 in 2019, while the other has been part of the Victoria and Albert Museum's permanent collection since 1983. In this video, I want to share what I've learned about this furniture/artwork and a few personal thoughts along the way. So welcome to Study with me. Trumeau is a type of furniture that was widely popular in 18th century Italy. A tall cabinet divided into three sections, drawers at the bottom, a folding writing desk in the middle, and an upper cabinet. It was considered the most important piece of furniture in Italian interiors at that time. Trumeaus were typically covered with rich decorations referencing both exterior and interior classical architectural details. These were widely popular even until early 20th century. If you are a designer, you probably heard the name Ponti. Ponti was an Italian architect, interior designer, and an industrial designer who worked for nearly 6 decades, from 1920s through 70s, playing a central role in the renewal of Italian design after the wars. One of his most influential achievements, I would say, was the Domus magazine, which he founded in 1928 and remained deeply involved with as an editor until his death in 1979. Here are some early Domus covers. A few were actually designed by Piero Fornasetti, whom Ponti commissioned, making the beginning of their long and creative collaboration. The magazine is still published today, continuing to invite voices from around the world. As it approaches its 100th anniversary in 2028, Domus has launched its 10 by 10 by 10 project, inviting 10 leading architects as guest editors to celebrate the milestone. The very first issue, published in January 1928, was titled Architecture and Decor of the Modern Home in the City and in the Country. That title perfectly captures Ponti's belief that furniture, decoration, and architecture should form one integrated whole. Around the time in the late 1920s and early 1930s, Ponti also created Domus Nova, a furniture line developed with Emilio Lancia and others. This photograph shows an 11-piece dining room displayed at a Milan department store. The goal was to bring functional, rational, and modern yet elegant furniture to middle-class Italian homes, pieces that could be mass-produced without losing a sense of taste. If you look closely, there's a Trumeau in the background. Trumeau designed during this period have simple forms and elegant proportions, yet they retain a strong architectural character, like the metal detail and horizontal wood carvings that recall Ionic columns and an architrave above. This next example from 1930 shows a more simplified version with expanded storage and desk space for better everyday use. Its new proportions emphasize the beauty of the wooden grain, and the thick tapering legs and projecting top subtly reference classical architecture, maintaining a sense of presence and gravity in the room, which aligns with the origins of the Trumeau design. After the Second World War, Ponti returned as an editor to Domus magazine in 1948. The following 1950s were years of great vitality in architecture, art, and design. During this time, Ponti designed high-end interiors and custom furniture for private and commercial clients, constantly experimenting and collaborating with craftsmen and artists. Here's an example, a pastry shop where Fornasetti painted whimsical murals of people and pastries, and this another project, Casa was described by Ponti himself as a house of fantasy. Ponti admired Fornasetti's imagination deeply. He once said, "He makes objects speak." Trumeau from Casa Ceccato, 1950, as an example, Ponti designed unique sculptural forms for Fornasetti to decorate. The oversized door really accentuates the profiles of each cabinet, hiding the chunky storage space behind. Supported by light back structure, each volume appears visually separated rather than merely stacked, making the overall composition lighter and more sculptural. Fornasetti added foliate decorations and also map and scenery of Venice inspired by late 15th century prints adding stories. Another unique feature is a semicircular alto-like niche, a clear reference to classical architectural vocabulary. The niche contains a porcelain figure, which makes sense. Around this time, Ponti and Fornasetti were actively prototyping new furniture ideas. In 1951, the iconic Trumeau Architettura was presented at the 9th Milan Triennale. Many of Ponti's thoughts carried through this piece. The original version has a distinctive curved top, making the end of the building and suggesting a roofline. This was especially interesting to me as this approach doesn't rely on adding classical motifs to express a ceiling or roof, while still giving character to an otherwise ordinary rectangle. Door frames disappeared, leaving only thin, minimal framing around each printed panel, providing a clean, uninterrupted canvas for Fornasetti's imagination to unfold. So far, we've looked at the evolution of Trumeau shapes through Ponti's work. Now let's turn into its surface decorations. Piero Fornasetti was born in 1913 in Milan. He was a designer, decorator, painter, and printer. During his career, he created more than 13,000 works from prints, objects, furniture to interiors. Between 1943 and 1946, while he was on exile in Switzerland, he developed a concept called practical madness. His son Barnaba Fornasetti later described practical madness as the guiding principle of the atelier, where creativity exists in perfect harmony with utility, bringing art into everyday life. Fornasetti was trained mainly as a painter. In early 20s, he received mural commissions, and these works reveal his strong understanding of perspective and geometry, and his ability to imagine space that extends beyond the wall itself. In 1933, while still as a student, Fornasetti exhibited printed silk scarves at the Milan Triennale, and Ponti noticed his work there. Their long collaboration started with the series of Domus magazine cover in 1939, and their relationship grew fast as a long-term partnership with the shared idea that art and functionality can coexist. Ponti once noted, in spite of Fornasetti's decoration being overflowing and fantastic, and sometimes almost too much, it finds its natural, impassable limit in the shape of the decorative object. What fascinates me most about this piece is Fornasetti's use of illusion, trompe-l'oeil. Trompe-l'oeil means to deceive the eye, a flat surface pretending to have depth and space. Fornasetti often used architectural prints as his source of inspiration. His architectural paintings completely covers this three-dimensional canvas. Even some parts move as someone opens or closes the door. The Metropolitan Museum, which owns 1975 edition, describes it, there is a surreal quality to Fornasetti's witty and inventive architectural fantasy, which plays games with perspective and preconceptions of interiors and exterior space. If you look at other Trumeau examples designed around the same time in the 1950s, you can see just how unconventional the architectural Trumeau was. These examples are by Paolo Boffa, who had worked with Ponti in the 1920s before establishing his own studio. These are original lithograph prints produced in Fornasetti's studio, which I found on Christie's website, sold in 2016. Fornasetti's imagine eclectic architectural scene, inspired by different periods and places, of course with his signature surrealistic touch. The image on the left is one of his self-portraits from the 1940s, showing us his mind at work. Literally, we see through his brain as he contemplates mathematics. On the right is Fornasetti himself holding a plate he designed with the painted arms that seamlessly merges his art world and the real world. You can even spot the Trumeau Architettura in the background. The upper section is the facade of Casa Fontana Silvestri in Milan. This building has a very unique history. It was a Renaissance renovation project that transformed an early Gothic house. The arched Gothic windows were uncovered later during the restoration. Its street facade was famously decorated with illusionistic frescoes by Bramante, painted pilasters, baked marble panels, and classical ornaments. Though the frescoes are now barely visible, their appearance is known from Paravicini's 19th century watercolor drawing. It's unclear whether Fornasetti ever studied this current version of the facade, where two architectural languages, Gothic and Renaissance, collide, but the resemblance is still intriguing. His composition feels intentionally deconstructed, less like an actual building and more like a piece of modern art. Perhaps this is more accurate representation, as no one can truly see the entire building frontage at once, but rather experience it through different moments. The folding desk panel was inspired by the courtyard in Brera Academy, the very school where Fornasetti studied drawings, and also from which he was expelled after just 1 year for bad discipline. The choice of courtyard scene is especially interesting. The square opening of the courtyard almost matches the silhouette of the lower cabinet itself, making the drawing feel more spatial and integrated with the form. Thought it's such a clever use of trompe-l'oeil. As a result, one might feel like using a miniature scale model as a cabinet space. Fornasetti was known for his masterful lithographic technique, transferring his meticulously drafted drawings onto paper and then onto wood panels. The original piece shows a warm yellow tint today because the lacquer coating has naturally aged over time, but his original intent was to keep the decoration strictly black and white. Fornasetti's admiration for Piranesi's drawings explains his fascination with both etching technique and architecture as a source of inspiration. Some of early examples include the ancient Rome plate series. These are more like a painting transferred to porcelain plates. But Fornasetti worked with a deep knowledge of architectural principles such as order, proportions, and symmetry, and always seeking balance between decoration and rational form. The cupola series that depicts the interior of a dome seen from below, and the courtyard series that depicts different shapes of courtyard from bird's eye view. And his imagination extended to a variety of products from coffee table, curtains, to wall panels depicting an imaginary city. These examples introduce architectural/spatial experiences into everyday objects. Ponti commented on one of Fornasetti's table decorations. Here you see a pure form that remains intact, and a decoration that is just as pure. I find this such a powerful statement that decoration can have its own purpose and coexist harmoniously with the rational form. Back to Trumeau Architettura, another distinctive aspect of Fornasetti's work is his use of perspective. His compositions are rarely symmetrical, they often appear slightly skewed, as if the viewer is standing just off the central axis of the room. To me, that feels more realistic because in real life, we rarely experience architecture perfectly centered or frontal. These small shifts and vanishing points, intentionally avoiding kind of obvious compositions, create a tension that sparks interest and curiosity, inviting viewers to pause and look closer. Philippe Starck once commented, Fornasetti's object has the power to change the vibration in a place. This animation from the Fornasetti Atelier shows the variations of the Trumeau Architettura alongside many of the objects and motifs he explored throughout his career. It's really enjoyable to watch how his imagination completely transforms the character of the ordinary object, reminding us how decoration, when thoughtfully applied, can turn the everyday into something poetic. After the original piece was presented in 1951, the Trumeau Architettura was produced in very limited numbers. About 40 editions were made in the late 1950s and 60s. Soon after they presented the Trumeau Architettura, decoration began to be rejected and blacklisted. Post-war functionalism dismissed Fornasetti's overflowing imagination. Fornasetti's workshop in Milan slowly dwindled from 30 workers at its peak in the 1950s to only 3 employees. The changes Fornasetti himself made during the 50s and 60s, the very period when his atelier faced harsh criticism and struggled to survive, were quite significant, reflecting both adaptation and resilience. First, the distinctive curved top was modified to a flat one. Only 2 original Trumeau Architettura pieces have the curved top. The tapered, delicate wooden legs were replaced with simpler metal ones, and later changed again to a more robust black metal base. The lower storage changed from a double door cabinet to drawer, closer to the composition of a classical Trumeau, while adding more functionality. The decorations were also revised. In the upper cabinet, the imagery became more building-like, orderly, organized facade than the deconstructed original version. Fornasetti adjusted all drawings to become symmetrical and focused towards the center. The thin frame that once outlined each door panel disappeared, allowing the printed drawings to meet seamlessly and blend at corners. The exterior space folds visually into the interior. The experience is more continuous, enhancing the sense of immersion. The niche lighting is especially interesting, as the back surface is split to allow light to emerge from within. Also changes the reading of the alto niche dramatically. The current version feels calmer and more monumental, but perhaps it's also lost a bit of dynamic energy and visual tension that made the original one so exciting to look at. I would love to hear what you think about the changes of this furniture/artwork. In the 1980s, with the rise of postmodernism, Fornasetti's work found a new audience and gained renewed critical recognition. 10 new editions were produced in the 1980s. These were made to order from Fornasetti's Atelier in Milan. And even today, you can still order one directly from their website. The price starts at around $35,000. I'm glad to see how much effort goes into preserving his archive, not only to protect it, but to constantly regenerate it through new editions that respond to our time. If you're curious, the Fornasetti Atelier website is a great place to start. I've always been obsessed with trompe l'oeil, especially how this idea connects to today's projection mapping and augmented reality, the technologies that change how we read space and bring surprise and joy to the world of art and entertainment. The Trumeau Architettura as an art piece allows multiple readings, depending on the angle or height you are looking at it from. The act of opening a door and discovering new interior spaces in an unexpected way feels like a small, humorous surprise in a daily life, something Ponti and Fornasetti both tried to create. In this video, I focused on Fornasetti's effort to integrate architecture and furniture, turning everyday objects into art. Please let me know if you have any questions and share your thoughts below. Thank you for watching and for seeing the details with me.